Hello, my name is Shantae Smith, and I chose to do my presentation on racial discrimination. I chose racial discrimination because we, as a minority, experience racial discrimination on a daily basis. First of all, I'm going to explain to you all what is racial discrimination. According to Thomas Reuter, 2018, racial discrimination occurs when an individual is subjected to unequal treatment because of the actual or perceived race. Racial discrimination involves in treating someone unfavorable because of their skin color, hair texture, or facial features. If we think about it, how often do we judge others by their skin complexion or their religion or what they believe as far as like a certain a group that they participate in? Pretty much we have all either been discriminated or we have discriminated someone else. There are at least 5 different places that racial discrimination can be recognized. First, it can be recognized in the place of employment, housing, education, public relations, and law enforcement. During the placement of employment, an example would be when a white woman or a white man getting hired based on their name with the same credentials as a minority or black or Asian or either a Hispanic individual with the same credentials. An example of a housing discrimination would be when the real estate agent is selling a home and they are trying to discourage you from buying the home in a particular area where that population is either a slim to none or a where a majority of others, are not located. Education, an example of education discrimination would be when college not accepting applicants over the age of 50. That will be more so of a age discrimination. During the public resources, men make more money than men in a working in a public resources, and we often see that a lot. When we working in factories or either in upper blue collar positions, men tend to make a little bit more money than women, regardless if the woman is qualified or has the same education as a man. She still tends to be racially profiled by the sex. Also, law enforcement, minorities and white both use illegal drugs. We'll say marijuana, for example. But if you look at the prison system, majority of the prisons make up the majority of blacks, followed by Hispanics, and trickling down to whites. And what reason is that? That's the question still today, because we still have a lot of things that's going on in our judicial system that shouldn't be going on. And in my PowerPoint presentation, I also posted videos explaining, I think it was in New York City, explaining how the minority police officers really explain how everything went behind the scenes that we as a society might not know about. There are 4 racial discrimination laws that are applicable today. The most influent federal laws related to racial discrimination is the Civil Rights Acts of 1964. And the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was proposed first by John F. Kennedy. After the Civil Rights Act in 1964 ended, it pretty much put an end to segregation in public places and banned employment discriminations on the basis of race, color, religion, sex, or national origin. The act was also signed by President Lyndon Johnson after Kennedy was assassinated in November of 1963. And the Civil Rights Acts of 1964 pretty much was put in place to prohibit racial discrimination in employment. The second act was the Equal Credit Opportunity Act. And according to that act, it pretty much prohibits the discrimination of creditors from racially discrimination against creditors or applicants, regardless of the race, color, national origin, sex, religion, age, or marital status, when determining the approval of a credit application. The third one is Fair Housing Act of 1968. The Fair Housing Act of 1968 prohibits the sale, rental, and financing house based on race, religion, sex, color, national origin, disability, or family status. The Fair Housing Act of 1968 was passed by the House of Representatives after the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King in 1968. The last one is the Voting Rights Act of 1965. The Voting Act of 1965 prohibits the racial discrimination in voting practices. It was signed also by President Lyndon B. Johnson in order to end the decline of African Americans' rights to vote, as well as the qualification test that they were obligated to take before they could vote. And the Voting Rights Act of 1965 also marked the response to the Jim Crow law, which was put in place to enforce segregation. And the Jim Crow law was also known as the segregated but not equal law. And still to this day, we still experience some Jim Crow laws because we're not segregated today, but at the same time, we're not equal. According to the Pew Research in 2015, showed that blacks with the higher education level were actually more likely to see discrimination, and 80% of blacks with some college said they experienced discriminations versus 60% with high school diplomas or less. And me as a minority, I'm a minority with my race and also my sex. I sometimes feel that I am personally discriminated because I'm very educated, but at the same time, I feel like my name and my race and also my sex, it keeps me out of a lot of job opportunities or even opportunities in itself. Another thing that I researched was the name. A name that sounded black or either that was close to black were also disqualified or kicked out by either the potential employers or either a computer-based system, as far as like Shamika versus Sharon. And I saw a lot of research and a lot of videos online showing, a test on using the same exact resume but changing the first name, and the age as well played a part as denying individuals job positions. And another thing I researched was 60% of non-white voters believe racism is still a major fact in the views of people who want to deport all undocumented immigrants. Only 30% of white voters feel the same. According to Pew Research Center 2015, Non-white minorities receive a great amount of hate from society, but in reality, the Jews often receive the most discriminated treatment. This doesn't surprise me because the Jews also received a vast majority of discrimination back in before slavery as well, and also during before Christ, as was before Christ comes, the Jews were the most hated, and still nothing has changed today. Although we say, blacks are being discriminated, or Mexicans, Hispanics are being, or Latinos are being discriminated, but Jews also receive a vast amount of discrimination as well. Well, this would conclude my video on discrimination to minorities in our society. Thank you.